They said he was just a quiet man flipping pancakes in a roadside diner. But when a billionaire biker ripped his shirt, the room fell silent. Not because of his scars, but because of the Marine Corps tattoo and the ghosts it brought with it. What was a decorated war hero doing hiding behind an apron? And why did that tattoo shake something buried deep inside her? This isn't just a story about the past. It's about redemption, quiet courage, and a little girl who unknowingly held the key to healing two broken hearts. If stories of resilience, love, and second chances move you, take a moment to subscribe and join us for more tales that touch the heart, one quiet miracle at a time. Now, let's begin. The heat clung to everything in Lena's joint like a second skin. It was the kind of Arizona afternoon that melted asphalt and frayed tempers, where the hum of cicadas outside fought with the slow churn of ceiling fans above. Inside, the regulars lingered over cheap coffee and meatloaf specials, half listening to the twang of an old Merle Haggard tune floating from the jukebox. Then the Harleys came. Their roar shattered the lazy lull of the afternoon, echoing off the dusty windows and stopping conversations mid-sentence. Heads turned. A child dropped her spoon. Even the cook behind the counter paused with his spatula in midair. The door swung open like a declaration of war. Leading the chrome-plated procession was Ramona Steele, part leather, part legend. Her boots struck the hardwood floor with a confidence that demanded room. Jet-black shades covered eyes that had once made headlines and enemies alike. Her sleeveless vest exposed muscular arms inked with bold, sprawling tattoos. Wings, chains, wolves, fire. Every inch of her seemed deliberate, dangerous, designed. Behind her, 6 other bikers peeled in like they owned the place. They wore high-end riding gear, not the patched denim of highway trash, but designer leather. Even their helmets looked expensive. But it was Ramona everyone noticed, not just for her appearance, but for the way she carried something sharper than any blade. Power. At the back of the room, behind the open kitchen window, a man continued flipping pancakes. He was graying, lean, with sleeves rolled just high enough to show tanned forearms and scars not meant for stories. His name tag read Harlan. Just that. No last name. No title. Harlan Boyd didn't look up. "Is this seat taken?" Ramona's voice carried like steel brushed with velvet. She didn't wait for an answer. Instead, she motioned to the long, worn-down counter where the man worked. "I hear the pie's good here. That true, cowboy?" Harlan finally looked at her, not hostile, just calm. "If you're polite to Mary, our waitress, you might get a warm slice." Ramona smirked. "Polite? Darling, I don't wear polite." She turned her gaze to the waitress, a plump woman in her 50s, with a name tag that read, Mary, and an apron stained with strawberry jam. Mary flinched slightly, but nodded and scribbled something on her pad. Ramona returned her attention to Harlan. There was something too still about him, too quiet in a world where silence usually meant history. "You look familiar," she said. "Ever ride with the Broken Sons out of Nevada?" "Nope." "You serve?" Harlan was wiping down the grill, his motions precise and unhurried. "Lot of people serve," he said. Ramona leaned over the counter. "You got that look, the kind of man who's seen blood and made peace with it." He didn't reply. Then came the moment. Fast, stupid, electric. One of the bikers, some slick-haired hotshot in mirrored glasses, made a crude comment about the waitress. Ramona laughed. Not a kind laugh, but one honed to cut. And Harlan moved. Not aggressively, not loudly. Just placed himself between the waitress and the voice. "No need for that," he said. Quiet. Firm. The kind of voice that made men put down guns before realizing they were holding one. The biker rolled his eyes. "Easy, Gramps. I'm just talking." But Ramona stepped forward now, interested, curious, provoked. "You've got this whole noble warrior vibe," she said, narrowing her eyes. "Like you're some ex-soldier turned fry cook out here playing ghost." She stepped closer. Too close. Her hand shot out. Quick. Sharp. She grabbed a fistful of Harlan's collar and yanked. The sound of tearing fabric cracked through the room like a gunshot. Gasps followed. Someone dropped a plate. The jukebox glitched into silence. Ramona's fingers still clenched the shredded collar of Harlan's shirt. But her face had changed. So had the entire bar. Because across Harlan Boyd's chest and shoulder, partially hidden beneath his undershirt, was a tattoo. Faded, sprawling, undeniable. The eagle, globe, and anchor of the United States Marine Corps. Beneath it, barely visible, were the words, Force Recon, Operation Red Dust, Gunny Sergeant Harlan J. Boyd, and then the scars. Not decorative ones, not tattoos, real scars. Jagged, deep. The kind that don't come from bar fights or motorcycle accidents. The kind that spoke of shrapnel, bullets, fire. Ramona staggered back a step. Her hand dropped, the torn fabric fluttering like a white flag to the floor. No one spoke, no one moved. A desert hush fell over Lena's joint, and Harlan, the quiet man behind the grill, the single dad who wore a worn wedding band and packed his daughter's school lunches before dawn, simply reached up, pulled the halves of his shirt together, and looked Ramona in the eye. His voice was low, steady. Some things aren't meant to be displayed. They're meant to be remembered. Then he turned, calmly plated a slice of rhubarb pie, and slid it across the counter toward her. "That's on the house," he said. "First slice is always free. But respect, that costs something." And just like that, he walked away. By morning, the story had spread faster than wildfire on desert wind. They called him the Quiet Marine now. Word had trickled from booth to booth, gas station to diner, rest stop to church hall. At a local gun shop, someone swore they saw a recon tattoo in the same spot on an old man's chest once. Must have been him. A woman at the library remembered how he always checked out war novels, but never said a word. A few even claimed they'd noticed the way he never sat with his back to the door. But no one had really seen Harlan Boyd, until yesterday. Now everyone had questions, and no one had answers. At Willow Creek Elementary, it hit a little closer to home. June Boyd, age 9, had always kept to herself. Smart, quiet, polite in the way children of single parents often were, like she knew her dad had enough on his plate without adding misbehavior. She loved books, always had 2 pencils sharpened, and made a point to say, "Thank you," even to the janitor. But today, the whispers followed her like gnats. "Is it true your dad's a killer? Was he in a war? Did he, shoot people? My dad said he has a death tattoo." June didn't cry, not in front of them. She just clenched her tiny fists and walked faster, blinking the way her dad taught her, once slow, once fast, to dry the eyes without breaking your stride. Back at Lena's joint, the air had shifted. Sheriff Wade Templeton leaned against the counter, sipping black coffee like it owed him rent. He was in his late 50s, weathered like a well-used saddle, with a badge that hadn't seen a polishing cloth in a decade. He and Harlan went way back, further than either of them admitted. They didn't talk often, but when they did, it was never small talk. "You know they're talking," Wade said without looking up. Harlan refilled the sheriff's mug, silent. "Kid at the Texaco said you've got Marine Death ink." Wade smirked. "Bet that'd look great on a t-shirt." Still, Harlan said nothing. Wade leaned in a little, lowered his voice. "You still haven't told anyone, huh? Not even June?" "Told what?" "You know damn well what. Red dust." The silence between them felt like concrete setting. Wade exhaled and leaned back, watching Harlan wipe down the griddle with the same care a surgeon might give an open chest. "You ever gonna tell her what happened?" Wade asked. Harlan looked up. "I already did. By living like this." Wade didn't push further. He knew that tone. A man who had closed the book, even if he never stopped carrying it. In a high-rise suite overlooking Tucson's skyline, Ramona Steele scrolled through her phone with uncharacteristic hesitation. Her assistant, a snarky 20-something in techwear, slid a tablet across the table. "I did a deep dive on your Boy Scout cook." Ramona took it without comment. What she saw froze her blood. Gunnery Sergeant Harlan J. Boyd, Force Recon, Operation Red Dust, 3 Bronze Stars, 1 Purple Heart, multiple classified commendations, and a formal request, handwritten, declining a Congressional Medal of Honor. No further public records. Service file sealed. Ramona leaned back, stunned. Why would someone walk away from that? The assistant shrugged. Guilt. Or humility. Or maybe he just got tired of bleeding. That night, Harlan found June sitting cross-legged on the back porch, her school bag still on. "You didn't eat," he said softly. She didn't look up. "They said you were a killer." Harlan sat beside her, the wooden steps creaking under his weight. "I was a Marine," he said. "That means sometimes I had to make hard decisions. Not because I wanted to, but because others were in danger." "Did you kill people?" "Yes," he answered. No softening. No excuse. Just truth. And I saved people. I tried to save more than I lost. June didn't speak. Her tiny fingers fidgeted with the zipper of her backpack. "There was a mission once," Harlan continued, "in a place far away. A building filled with children. Bad men were using them as shields. My team went in. We got most of them out. But I lost 3 brothers that day." He paused, swallowed something invisible and heavy. "It was my call. My plan. I believed it was the right thing. But not everyone made it out." June looked up at him then, not afraid, not angry, just searching. "Did it make you stop being a soldier?" "No, it made me stop being at war." Later that night, after June went to bed, Harlan stood in the tiny laundry room behind the kitchen. He pulled down an old box marked Tools. But inside wasn't a wrench or screwdriver. Inside was folded fabric, desert camo, worn thin in the elbows, a set of chevrons, a broken pair of dog tags, and beneath it all, a photo, blurred and scratched. 4 men in full gear, 3 grinning. 1, Harlan. Not. Behind them, a crumbling schoolhouse. At their feet, chalk drawings of suns and stick figures. He stared at it for a long time. Then he placed the photo back in the box and shut the lid. Just as he reached for the light switch, a thought crept in like smoke under a door. What if I'm not hiding from the world, but from myself? The chrome beasts rolled in again, but this time, they came quieter. The roar of Harley engines was still there, but subdued, less like a parade, more like a procession. Ramona Steele dismounted first, her boots clicking against the parking lot pavement. Gone was the cocky smirk, the commanding aura that had once cut the air like a blade. Today, she moved with something unfamiliar on her face. Regret. Lena's joint hadn't changed since her last visit. Same cracked neon sign, same sticky screen door, same fading chalkboard outside advertising, "Pie so good, you'll forgive your ex." She pushed through and found herself standing in the same doorway where she'd once torn a man's shirt and nearly shredded something deeper. June sat at the corner booth, nose buried in a notebook, sketching something intently. Across the counter, Harlan was washing coffee mugs like he was prepping for a ceremony. His movements, as always, were precise and quiet. The room buzzed with soft diner noise, forks on plates, the low hum of a country song, the occasional clink of a dropped spoon. Ramona stepped forward, cleared her throat. Harlan didn't look up. "No autographs," he said dryly. She chuckled, a little awkward. "I'm not here for autographs." Finally, his eyes rose to meet hers. Calm. Level. Like desert stone under afternoon sun. "Then what are you here for?" "Pie," she said, "and an apology." Silence fell between them like a third person. Harlan looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Pie, I still make," he said, placing a clean plate on the counter. "But apologies." He paused, not harshly, just honestly. "Those take time." She nodded, accepting it more than understanding it. "I wasn't raised to say sorry," Ramona admitted. "I was taught to win." "That doesn't mean you can't learn," Harlan replied, turning to the kitchen. She watched him go, her gaze lingering on the spot just beneath his shoulder blades, where the torn shirt had once revealed the eagle, globe, and anchor. She could still see the outline in her mind, not just the ink, but the history it screamed. She took a seat. June glanced up briefly, wary, then lowered her eyes back to her sketchbook. "Hi," Ramona said gently. "I saw your drawing the other day." June didn't respond. Ramona leaned a little closer, noticing what the girl was working on now. A picture of a tall man holding a spatula like a rifle, standing in front of a pancake-shaped sun. Off to the side, a girl with glasses and pigtails held a plate like a shield. Ramona blinked. "That's you and your dad?" June gave the slightest nod. "You're very talented," Ramona said. Another nod. Then, after a beat, "Did you mean it? About the apology?" The words were small but sharp. Ramona nodded. "Yeah, I meant it." The girl tilted her head, studying Ramona with eyes far too wise for her age. And that's when it happened. Ramona saw it, the way June's gaze held hers, steady, quiet, burning beneath the surface. It was the same gaze Ramona had seen in a mirror once, long ago, when she was no older than June, standing in the dirt outside a refugee camp in Mosul, her clothes torn, her shoes mismatched, her mother already gone. The same eyes, the same fire. The world had looked at her back then and seen a statistic. But a soldier, faceless under a helmet, had knelt beside her, handed her clean water, and whispered, "You're not invisible. Not to me." She hadn't remembered that moment in years, had buried it under contracts, chrome, and closed doors. Now it came roaring back. She stared at June, stunned, a hand involuntarily resting on her chest, over a scar she'd hidden under leather and success. "You okay?" June asked softly. Ramona nodded, but it wasn't quite true. Harlan returned with a slice of pie, still warm, the crust golden and whispering with sugar. He placed it gently in front of her. No words. Ramona glanced down, then up. "Can I ask you something?" He raised an eyebrow. "Why here?" she asked. "Why not somewhere big? With your record, you could be anywhere." He wiped his hands on a cloth, looked past her, at the faded flag above the counter, at the empty boots beneath the shelf where veterans left their challenge coins. "I've been everywhere," he said. "Didn't like who I was in most of those places." "And now?" He shrugged. "Now I make breakfast for truckers, lunch for lonely hearts, dinner for school teachers. It's not glory, but it's good." She studied him. There was a steadiness to Harlan Boyd that no war could break, and no apology could shake loose. "I don't know why I care," she admitted, "but I do. You're not what I expected." "No one is," he said. "You just look too fast." Outside, the sun dipped low, stretching long shadows across the pavement. Inside, June returned to her drawing. Harlan refilled Ramona's coffee without asking, and for the first time in a long time, Ramona let herself sit still, No deals, no deadlines, no armor. Just leather, chrome, and ghosts. And maybe for the first time, a place where she could let one of them go. Sheriff Wade Templeton had a habit of trusting his gut. It was the kind of instinct honed over 3 decades of watching people lie with their eyes while their hands told the truth. Wade wasn't one for conspiracy theories or witch hunts, but when someone showed up out of nowhere with too much money, too little backstory, and an eye for the quiet corners of his county, well, that set off alarms loud enough to wake the coyotes, and Ramona Steele had set off every last one of them. He sat at his desk that morning in the Willow Creek Sheriff's Office, chewing on the cap of a ballpoint pen and staring at her file. Officially, she was squeaky clean. Multiple business licenses, tax records in order, no criminal charges, not even a traffic violation in the last 5 years. Too clean. The kind of clean that made you wonder who'd done the scrubbing. He clicked over to the satellite images on his monitor, zoomed in. 3 properties. All roadside. All formerly family-run motels or diners. All now demolished. And all purchased under shell companies connected to Steel Horizons, LLC. It wasn't illegal. Hell, it wasn't even unusual. Big money rolled through backwater towns all the time, buying up useless land for modern development. Wade had seen it happen in the next county over. A dozen diners replaced with a rust and chrome biker resort, boasting custom suites, tattoo lounges, and curated Americana. It brought jobs, sure, but it also pushed out the locals, raised prices, changed everything. And now she was here, sitting in Lena's joint like it was her new headquarters. Wade narrowed his eyes. Was it just guilt that brought her back to Harlan? Or was guilt the cover for something else? The bell above the station door jingled. Deputy Alan Ruiz stepped in, his uniform freshly pressed, clipboard under one arm. "Got the background on Steele's holdings," he said, laying down the report. "She's not listed as the buyer on anything, not directly, but her name's on the advisory board for Horizon Ridge Development, which owns the parent company of Steel Horizons." Wade rubbed the bridge of his nose. "She's buying the road." "Looks like it." Ruiz hesitated. "You think she's targeting Lena's joint next?" Wade didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the drawer, pulled out a folded county map, and laid it flat. "There's a pattern," he said, tracing the old Highway 83 with his finger. "She's carving out a corridor, a straight line from Tucson to the border. All the little stops in between. Gone. Paved over. Except this one." He tapped Lena's joint. The only piece left, the only place people still slowed down for. Later that afternoon, Wade pulled into the lot at Lena's. He didn't walk in right away. Instead, he sat in the cruiser for a moment, watching through the dusty windshield. Ramona was sitting at a booth by the window, laptop open, phone beside her, sipping coffee like she belonged there. Harlan was behind the counter, flipping a skillet with that same focused calm, the kind that came from years of knowing chaos and choosing peace anyway. And June was in the corner, showing a sketch to an old veteran who smiled like he hadn't smiled in years. Wade sighed, climbed out of the cruiser, and stepped inside. "Afternoon," he greeted, tipping his hat. Harlan gave a nod. "Coffee?" "Always." As the sheriff slid onto the stool, Ramona looked up from her laptop. "Sheriff," she said, polite but wary. "Ms. Steele," Wade returned. "Or do you prefer Developer Steele these days?" Her expression flickered, just a flash. But it was enough. "I see you've been doing your homework," she replied coolly. "I like to know who's interested in my town," he said, "especially when they seem more invested than they admit." "I came for pie," she said, lifting her cup. "Stayed for clarity." Wade leaned back, resting a heavy hand on the counter. That clarity come with blueprints, purchase offers, or demolition permits? Harlan paused mid-motion, skillet hovering over a plate. Ramona didn't answer right away. She closed her laptop, slowly, deliberately. "I won't insult your intelligence," she said. "Yes, I'm involved with a development group. And yes, there was interest in this location." "And now?" Wade asked, voice like gravel, and law rolled into one. Ramona looked toward the far end of the diner, where June was now laughing with a group of elderly women knitting over their tea. "Now, I'm not so sure." When Wade left, he didn't threaten, didn't warn. He just placed a challenge coin from his time in Fallujah onto the counter. "If she's lying to you," he said to Harlan, "she's damn good at it. And if she's not, she might be exactly what this town didn't know it needed." Harlan didn't pick up the coin, just looked at it for a long time, then finally said, "She's not the only one with ghosts." That night, as the sun dipped behind the rust-colored cliffs, Ramona stood outside Lena's joint, helmet in hand. Harlan stepped out beside her, wiping his hands on a towel. "You didn't come here just for pie," he said. "No," she admitted. "But you stayed." She nodded. "Because I saw something worth staying for." "Pie can do that," he said dryly. Ramona smiled. "So can people." There was a pause, a quiet between them that wasn't awkward. It just was. She looked at him. "You don't trust me." "I don't distrust you," he said. "But I've seen towns like this disappear. Seen men like me bulldozed without ever hearing the engine start." She looked away. "I wasn't going to fight for this place," she said. "But then your daughter looked at me, and for a second, I saw the little girl I used to be. I remembered what it felt like to be invisible, and then to be seen." Harlan said nothing, but he didn't look away. Back inside, June sat at the counter, sipping chocolate milk and staring at her drawing, one she hadn't shown anyone yet. It was a picture of Lena's joint, drawn like a fortress. Around it, chrome monsters circled. Inside, behind the windows, stood her father, a quiet soldier with a spatula like a sword. And outside the front door, a woman in black leather stood guard. The breakfast crowd at Lena's joint arrived not by the clock, but by the scent of bacon and trust. They came in boots and button-downs, denim and calloused hands. They sat in silence or in small murmurs, like church pews on a weekday morning, not out of reverence for the food, but for something unspoken that lived in the air. Harlan Boyd moved behind the counter like time itself had slowed to match his rhythm. Every motion was intentional, the way he wiped the counter in smooth, concentric circles, or cracked eggs with the softest flick of his wrist. He didn't speak much. He didn't have to. At the far end of the counter, June sat on a high stool, legs dangling, hands busy. She was folding napkins. Not carelessly, not distractedly, but with the same quiet precision her father used in everything he did. Fold. Align. Press the edges. Turn once. Fold again. She had created a small stack of perfect squares, each one symmetrical, stacked like playing cards. It was something she did most mornings now, not because anyone asked her to, but because it felt like building order out of chaos. And in her world, a world where whispers followed her in school and people stared too long at her father, order felt like safety. A man sat 2 stools down, watching. He was in his 70s, maybe older, with deep lines in his face and a tremor in his hand he tried to hide. His name was Frank Mallory, a retired trucker, Vietnam vet, and regular at Lena's for longer than anyone could remember. Most days, he kept to himself. Today was different. As Harlan set a fresh mug of coffee in front of him, dark, strong, no sugar, Frank's eyes lingered on the way the man poured it. There was no flourish, no wasted movement, just a steady hand and careful angle. Then Harlan reached into a drawer and pulled out a small silver spoon, Not the regular ones, but the long-handled kind, thinner, older. He placed it gently on the counter, right in front of Harlan. Then he took a long sip of the coffee, closed his eyes, and exhaled like someone who'd just made peace with a ghost. No words were exchanged. None were needed. But the coin stayed on the counter, not for payment, but for recognition. Across the room, Ramona Steele watched the whole exchange from her booth near the window. She didn't interrupt. She didn't record it. She just observed. There was something about the way the whole diner moved around Harlan, like a clock whose hands all pointed inward, a quiet center of gravity. And now she was beginning to understand why people came not just for the food, but for the stillness that came with it. He wasn't just cooking, he was restoring things. Later, as the breakfast crowd thinned, Harlan approached Frank's table with a slice of banana cream pie, on the house. "You didn't have to do that," Frank said softly. "I didn't," Harlan replied. "But I wanted to." Frank gestured toward the coin. "I never gave that to anyone." "It's not for me," Harlan said. "It's for what you remember." Frank looked down at it, then nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. But Harlan was already walking away. In the kitchen, June sat on a milk crate, napkin stack complete. "Why did that man cry?" she asked. Harlan was rinsing a pan. He paused. "Because sometimes, doing something small the right way reminds someone of something big." "Like folding napkins?" He looked at her. "Exactly like that." She smiled, proud, and reached into her backpack, pulling out a small sketch. It showed a mug of coffee with steam that curled into the shape of a military badge. Below it, a hand, steady, worn, held a coin above a counter. "I think I want to draw stories now," she said. "Not just pictures." Harlan crouched beside her. "Then draw the ones that matter, even if no one sees them." She nodded. "Like yours?" He didn't answer, but the silence was yes enough. That afternoon, long after Frank had left, the challenge coin still sat on the counter, catching the light from the front windows. Ramona passed by on her way out, pausing to look at it. "Do I need one of those to belong here?" she asked. Harlan wiped his hands on a towel. "No, but you do have to sit still." "For how long?" "As long as it takes," she smirked. "Fair enough." She turned to go, then stopped. "Hey, what kind of pie is good for?" "Saying I want to do better." Harlan didn't hesitate. "Apple. Always apple." As the door swung shut behind her, Harlan walked back behind the counter. He didn't move the coin. He just let it be. A silent marker of a man who'd come home, found a place to remember, and left a piece of himself behind. And somewhere in the back, June began folding again, one square at a time, building a quiet fortress of cloth, memory, and small acts of honor. The scent of strong coffee and baked cornbread faded as the diner lights dimmed for the night. Harlan stood by the sink, methodically rinsing out steel pans, the water cascading like memory. The old building creaked with the sighs of age, but it wasn't the structure groaning, it was the past. And it had found its way in again. The dust choked the sun, turning midday into a bleak twilight. The sky rumbled, not from clouds, but from the constant, stomach-rattling percussion of mortar fire. Gunshots echoed in staccato rhythms down every alley. Harlan's squad moved like ghosts through rubble and blood, eyes scanning, breaths tight. His heart pounded not from fear, but from the weight of leadership. He had made a call this morning, one that split his unit in two. He told himself it was for the mission. It always was. They'd entered the collapsed orphanage just minutes after the blast. The air inside burned with smoke and grief. Concrete slabs leaned like drunk giants, threatening to bury anything that dared to move. Then, amidst the silence, a cough. Fragile. Then a whimper. Harlan dropped to his knees, and clawed through shattered bricks, cuts blooming across his arms. He pushed deeper into the wreckage, ignoring the warning calls behind him. There was no time. There was no protocol. There was just that sound, a child's breath against death's shadow. And then he saw her. A small girl, no older than 5, half buried beneath a fallen support beam. Her eyes were too wide for her face, lashes clumped with ash. Blood matted her hair. Her left wrist, trembling slightly, peeked from under the wreckage. And there, a butterfly tattoo. Faint, smudged, but unmistakable. Blue and gold ink. He wrapped her in his camo jacket, cradling her like glass. As he lifted her free, the building groaned again. A monstrous bone-deep creak. "Go!" he barked to his men. "Go now!" The world behind them collapsed. They didn't all make it out. The kitchen's fluorescent lights hummed softly above Harlan's head. He stared blankly at a sponge in his hand, mind thousands of miles and several lifetimes away. June had already gone to bed in the back room with her sketchbook and a string of questions about galaxies. He'd kissed her forehead, but barely remembered doing so. Tonight was one of those nights, the kind that found the cracks in your armor, even after all these years. He poured himself a glass of water, still seeing that girl's face through the steam rising from the sink. She had looked like June. But that wasn't the thing gnawing at him. It was the butterfly. The front door jingled open. He turned. Ramona Steele stepped into the diner, her boots echoing against the tile. No entourage, no noise. Just her. Leather jacket zipped halfway, hair tousled by the wind, face unreadable. She carried a small box. "Apple pie," she said. "Trade you for a minute." He didn't respond. "I baked it myself," she added. "I Googled humble pie. But this was the closest thing." He allowed the ghost of a smile. She set the box on the counter. "Mind if I sit?" "You already are," he said, nodding toward the stool she'd claimed. She removed her gloves next, slowly, methodically. The leather creaked in the silence. Harlan looked up, then froze. On the inside of her left wrist, just above the pulse point, was a butterfly. Blue and gold. He stared, not blinking. Ramona followed his gaze. She didn't cover it. "Had it since I was 5, she said softly. "Inked it myself with a needle and a bottle cap in a refugee camp. Stupidest thing I ever did. Until recently." Harlan swallowed, throat dry. "I never told anyone," she continued. "Didn't even remember it for a long time. But I had dreams of a man who smelled like sand and smoke, who wrapped me in warmth when everything else was broken." Her voice cracked. "You were there, weren't you?" Silence. "Then, I was," Harlan whispered. A tear traced Ramona's cheek. She didn't wipe it. "You saved me," she said. "And I never knew until last week, when I saw your hands make coffee like my dreams remembered. The napkin folds. The way you lifted your daughter out of the booth, like she was the most precious thing in the world." He sat down across from her. "I didn't know," he said. "I didn't recognize you. You wouldn't. They shaved my head after the explosion. I didn't speak for months." Harlan rubbed his jaw. "That building, it came down? We lost men that day." Ramona looked down. "I'm sorry. They were my friends, my family. Then they saved me too." Neither spoke for a long time. Then Ramona opened the box. Inside was a slightly lopsided slice of pie. "I'm not a good baker," she said. Harlan took the fork, tasted it. Pause. "It's terrible," he said. She laughed. The sound cracked something open in the room. "But it's honest," he added. "And that's more than most people give." Ramona stood to leave. But before turning, she reached into her jacket and placed something on the counter, beside the coin Frank Mallory had left earlier. A photo. Sepia-toned, faded, torn at the edges. It showed a small girl wrapped in a marine jacket 2 sizes too large, clutching a teddy bear, her eyes wide and hollow. "I found it in a Red Cross file," she said. "They took it right after I was pulled out." Harlan picked it up gently. He recognized the jacket, recognized the way his hands held her, just out of frame. "You kept going," he said. "That's what matters." Ramona nodded. "I built a billion-dollar empire, Harlan. But nothing I ever did felt as real as that moment. Right now. Right here." She paused at the door. "I'm not here to take your land," she said. "I'm here to remember who I was, and maybe figure out who I'm supposed to be next." And then she was gone. The door jingled closed behind her. Harlan sat for a long time, staring at the butterfly in the photo, the matching one still vivid in his memory. He reached up, touched the scar above his ribs. Some ghosts, it turned out, didn't haunt. They came back to say thank you. The evening breeze whispered through the cracked window, rustling the curtains of the tiny back room where June lay curled in her blanket fort, knees tucked to her chest, sketchbook resting gently beside her. The voices had started quiet, just a few murmured words between her father and the leather jacket lady. But like thunder building beyond the hills, they grew sharper, louder, then cracked open like a storm. She wasn't supposed to hear them, but she did. Out in the dining room, Harlan stood with one hand braced on the edge of the counter, knuckles white. Ramona stood across from him, breathing heavy, jaw clenched. "You think I came back just to stir up old ghosts?" she snapped. "I didn't know. I swear to God, Harlan, I didn't know." He said nothing, not for a long moment. Then, finally, "That doesn't make it easier." Ramona's voice dropped, low and shaking. "What do you want me to say? That I remember a child scream in the rubble? That I dreamt of a little girl I could never find? You think I didn't try to trace my past? They told me there were no survivors from that facility." "And yet," Harlan said, voice breaking, "you're standing right here." Ramona exhaled. Her hands trembled slightly, resting against the bar. "I didn't come looking for a child," she admitted. "I came because of the tattoo. Because something pulled me back here, and I—" From behind the cracked hallway door, a small voice cut through like glass. "Why did my mom leave me?" Both Harlan and Ramona froze. June stood barefoot at the edge of the hallway, her hair messy from sleep, her eyes wide, red and glistening. She clutched her sketchbook like a life raft. Ramona's heart dropped into her stomach. "June," Harlan began, stepping forward, but the girl stepped back. "You lied to me," she whispered. "No," Harlan said quickly. "I didn't lie. There were things I didn't know how to explain." June turned her eyes to Ramona. "Is it you?" Ramona's breath caught. She knelt slowly until her eyes met June's. "I didn't know," she said, the words thin and cracking. "I didn't know you existed, sweetheart. I would never have. Why didn't you look for me?" June's voice trembled, her small chest rising and falling with effort. "I did," Ramona whispered. "I swear I did. But the world is cruel sometimes, and I got lost in it. I lost pieces of myself." June looked at her father. "Is she really my mom?" Harlan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence between them said everything. He sat down on the edge of a booth, head in his hands. "I found you," he finally said, voice like gravel. "Wrapped in a hospital blanket, in a Red Cross facility. No records, no names. Just a butterfly on your wrist." Ramona gasped. June slowly turned her wrist over. There, faded and delicate, the same butterfly, blue and gold, mirrored her mother's exactly. Ramona sank lower to the floor, tears streaming freely now. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It was you." "I asked him every year," June said, her voice fragile. Why doesn't Mommy come back? He never answered, just hugged me real tight. Ramona looked at Harlan. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know who you were, he said. Until now. But after you did? He looked at her, tired, guarded. Because she's not a pawn in some reunion fantasy. She's a little girl with a whole heart. And hearts don't get passed around like forgotten names on government files. Ramona felt like the air had been punched from her lungs. I didn't come here to take her, she said. No, Harlan agreed. But what if she wants to go? They both turned to June, but she wasn't looking at either of them. She sat cross-legged now on the floor, flipping through her sketchbook. Slowly, she held up a drawing. It showed her and Harlan sitting on the porch steps, eating cornbread. A third figure stood behind them, half-formed, with motorcycle boots and wild hair. A question mark floated above her head. I don't know who you are yet, June said softly to Ramona, but I know I want to find out. Ramona's voice broke completely. So do I, baby. So do I. That night, after June had fallen asleep again, her fingers curled around the butterfly on her wrist, Harlan sat outside on the porch steps, the stars cold and bright above him. Ramona stepped out beside him, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She handed him one. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that had weight and memory. Did you name her June? Ramona asked eventually. No, Harlan said. She told me her name one night in a dream when she was still a baby. I woke up and just knew. June. Like something warm after too long in the cold. Ramona nodded. It fits. Harlan took a long sip, then looked at her. What do we do now? He asked. I don't know, Ramona admitted. I'm not good at soft landings, but I know I want to be part of her life, whatever that looks like. He gave a slight nod. She's got your fire, he said, and your heart. That made him laugh quietly. Ramona looked up at the stars. Maybe, she said, this isn't a mistake. Maybe it's a second chance. Harlan didn't answer right away, but after a long pause he said, maybe it's both. And somehow, that felt more honest than anything they'd said all night. The fire didn't start with flames. It started with the smell, sharp, chemical, and bitter, like something wrong, something angry. At 2:43 a.m., the silence of Lena's joint was shattered by the shattering of glass and the dull whoosh of liquid flame licking the front door. A Molotov cocktail, hurled through the screen window, landed near the entrance. But fortune, or fate, intervened. The bottle didn't break cleanly, the rag only half lit. The flame danced, but failed to catch. A scorch mark bloomed across the wood floor, then died out in a smoky hiss. By the time the sheriff arrived, summoned by a silent alarm Harlan had reluctantly installed last year, the damage was minimal. A singed curtain, a cracked pane of glass, and a blackened corner of the welcome mat. The building stood, but the air reeked of threat. By sunrise, yellow tape stretched across the front porch, like caution draped over memory. Locals stood quietly in clusters, coffee in hand, whispering. Ramona pulled up on her black custom Triumph, leather jacket still creased from sleep. She took in the scorched window, the faint graffiti, not welcome, spray painted in red on the siding, her stomach twisted. June sat on the steps, hugging her knees. Sheriff Maddox paced near the window, examining the remnants of the device. Inside, Harlan stood with a dustpan in one hand, broom in the other, sweeping up broken glass without a word. His face was unreadable, the same way it had been on the battlefield. Ramona stepped inside. I'm so sorry. He didn't look up. Why are you sorry? He asked softly. Because I know where this came from, she said. That got his eyes. I looked into the name on the deed, Maddox added, entering behind her. Merriweather Holdings. On paper, they're legit. In practice, they acquire roadside properties through intimidation, lowball offers, and incidents like this. Ramona closed her eyes. They're one of my companies. Harlan set the broom down. But I haven't touched them in years, she continued quickly. After Mosul, after I sold off parts of my portfolio. I didn't even know Merriweather was still active. Maddox crossed his arms. Your name's not listed, but a shell company connected to your former legal team still owns a controlling interest. Ramona's jaw tensed. I'll deal with it. Make sure you do, Maddox said, not unkindly. Because this is your fire now, whether you lit it or not. Later that morning, Harlan stood outside alone, staring at the old wooden sign above the porch. Welcome all. Its edges now blackened and warped. He didn't speak, just brought out a toolbox, a paintbrush, and a sandpaper block. He climbed the ladder slowly, each step echoing in the quiet. With deliberate strokes, he began sanding away the burns. The rough wood groaned under his hand, but he worked carefully, patiently, until the char faded and the letters re-emerged. The sign still bore scars, but scars could be beautiful. Scars could be truth. Behind him, Ramona approached. She didn't speak at first, just watched. Finally, she said, "Why aren't you angry?" He paused mid-stroke, looked down at her. Anger is a fire that feeds itself, he said. I've lit enough of those in my life. Ramona swallowed. I didn't know what kind of damage they'd done, that they were still operating that way. But it was my name that started this. It was your silence that let it keep going. The words weren't sharp, but they landed. I'm going to shut it down, she said. Sell the land back to the town, restore what was taken. And I'm going to make sure no one gets hurt again. I promise. He nodded once. Promises are like signs, pretty to look at. But what matters is what they guide people to. She smiled faintly. Then I'll show you where mine leads. By afternoon, June had made lemonade from scratch and handed cups to the volunteers who'd gathered to help. Veterans, farmers, former students, and even a few former skeptics came by with hammers, paint, brushes, and hands eager to work. No one mentioned the fire, but everyone knew what it meant. Ramona sat beside June on the stoop. You know, June said, I used to think you were just mean. Ramona chuckled. Fair. But you're not. Still fair. You just didn't know where to land? Ramona looked at her. That obvious, huh? June nodded. Dad says some people are comets, bright and loud and fast, but they burn out unless they find a place to fall. And what are you? June took a long sip of lemonade. I'm gravity. They sat in silence for a beat. Then both started laughing. Deep, healing laughter. By sunset, the sign had been rehung. The fresh paint glowed golden in the falling light. Welcome all. Ramona looked up at it, then down at her hands. I used to think I could buy peace, she said. That if I built enough empires, made enough noise, the quiet wouldn't find me. And now? Harlan asked, stepping beside her. I'm learning how to sit still, she said. It's hard. He looked at her for a long moment. You're doing fine. Their eyes met, and for a moment, they didn't carry the weight of wars, or fire, or loss. Just two people, standing under a sign that refused to burn. The whiskey was smooth, aged enough to taste like stories. Oak, smoke, and a trace of regret. Sheriff Maddox poured 2 fingers into each glass, slid one across the bar to Harlan, and took a seat on the same stool he'd claimed 100 times before. But tonight felt different. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was earned. To fire that didn't take, Maddox said, lifting his glass. To scars that don't show, Harlan replied. They clinked gently and drank. Outside, the sun had just dipped behind the hills, casting a long golden slant across Lena's joint. The charred edges of the old window had been cleaned, the paint retouched, but they'd left a faint black mark in one corner. Harlan insisted. So we remember what didn't break. The sheriff studied his old friend for a long beat. You know, I used to think you disappeared after red dust because of guilt, he said. Harlan stared into his glass. I did, but now I see, Maddox continued. You weren't running from the ghosts. You were building them a home. The next morning, it started with a single old man. He wore a faded army jacket, the patch on the sleeve barely clinging. He didn't speak much, just ordered black coffee, slid a photograph across the counter to Harlan, and nodded. The photo showed a younger version of him, boots in sand, rifle across his lap, sunburned smile. On the back, Camp Taji, 2005. Harlan put it on a shelf behind the register, just above the register bell. By noon, 2 more came. A woman with a prosthetic leg and a Marine Corps tattoo behind her ear. A quiet Latino man who barely made eye contact, but left a Purple Heart replica coin on the counter. They didn't want free meals. They wanted somewhere to sit, to belong. Montage sequence. Harlan clears out the old storage room. June helps him scrub walls. They repaint it soft green, hang a sign. The bunker for those who served. Sheriff installs a bookshelf. Books on trauma recovery, memoirs from veterans, even a children's book titled, My Dad Wears Invisible Armor. Ramona donates funds quietly through a local nonprofit, so no one knows her name is behind the new espresso machine and soundproof wall panels. One night, a grizzled Vietnam vet named Ernie sets up a shadow box. Inside, 3 dog tags, 1 tarnished Purple Heart, and a pack of Marlboros never opened. For the boys who didn't come back, a younger vet offers a guitar. Only has 5 strings, but it still sings. PTSD support circles form once a week. No therapists, just coffee, chairs, and stories, told when the room is dark enough. June, now nicknamed Little Sergeant by the regulars, starts a Polaroid wall. Vets take pictures holding up signs. Still fighting, still healing, still here. By the end of the month, Lena's joint looked the same from the outside. But inside, it pulsed with quiet transformation. The jukebox still played Johnny Cash, but now it competed with low laughter, stories punctuated by silence, and the occasional prayer whispered over beer. One evening, Ramona stood at the back of the room, unnoticed. She watched a woman in her 50s show a blurry photo of her convoy unit. She watched a man in his 30s tap his foot nervously until someone handed him a coin, and he broke into a grateful smile. She watched Harlan. He wasn't running anymore. He was anchoring. Later, on the porch, she joined him. "You built something," she said softly. He didn't look at her, just kept whittling a piece of wood. Habit picked up in some forgotten outpost overseas. "They did," he said. "I just unlocked the door." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You gave them permission to return." He paused, looked up at her. "They don't need my permission," he said. "Just a place to be broken without shame." She turned toward the darkening horizon. "I never got to say goodbye to Fallujah," she whispered. "Or Mosul, or to the part of me I left behind in the dirt there." Harlan looked at her. "You still can," he said. "But not by forgetting. By remembering without letting it burn you." That night, June snuck into the bunker. She tiptoed to the shadow box, looked at the names beneath the dog tags. Then she added something of her own. A small origami crane, folded from the napkin she used every day to set tables. On its wing, written in purple crayon, "For Dad's friends. Thank you." She didn't tell anyone, but the next morning, someone placed a second crane beside it, then a third. By the end of the week, there were 13, and in that quiet transformation, somewhere between coffee and coin, between scars and silence, Lena's joint became more than a roadside diner. It became a refuge, not just for warriors, but for the parts of them that had never found home. The man walked straight up to the counter. "You Harlan Boyd?" he asked, voice smooth but sharp. Harlan nodded once. "You want breakfast?" The biker smiled. "No, sir. I want to make an offer." Harlan kept wiping the counter. "I don't take orders, and I don't take offers before coffee." The biker chuckled, motioned to his boys to step back. They lingered near the jukebox, thumbing through the titles, pretending they didn't carry trouble in their pockets. "I represent an opportunity," the man continued. "We're building a haven for the open road, a place where freedom meets luxury. This place? It's right in our path." June paused her folding. The man reached into his leather vest and pulled out a folded piece of paper. 500,000 in cash. No questions. No contracts. Just walk away. Harlan looked down at the paper. He didn't touch it. Then, with the kind of stillness that turns more heads than anger, he reached into a drawer beneath the register. From it, he drew an old wooden box, scratched, worn at the corners. He opened it slowly and pulled out a single item, a rusted Purple Heart medal. The ribbon was frayed, the metal dented, dulled with time. But it shone in the morning light like it had blood and memory soaked into its core. Harlan placed it on the counter between them. No theatrics, just reverence. "This medal," Harlan said, his voice low and calm, "was given to me in a tent hospital in Mosul. A piece of shrapnel missed my heart by half an inch. Took 2 of my men instead." The biker's smile faded. "I didn't earn this because I fought," Harlan continued. "I earned it because I survived what others didn't. And when I left the Corps, I brought one thing with me. This place." He looked up, locking eyes with the man through his sunglasses. "This isn't just a building. It's where I fell and stood back up." Silence fell. Even the other bikers had stopped pretending to browse the jukebox. "No offer," Harlan said quietly, "can buy the ground where a man reclaims his soul." The biker looked down at the medal. For a moment, it was like he saw something unfamiliar. Honor, maybe. Or the weight of consequences he'd never carried. He took off his sunglasses, and for the first time, there was no bravado in his eyes. Just a flicker of understanding, of respect earned, not demanded. He nodded once. Then, without another word, he turned and left. His crew followed, boots quieter than before. The bell above the door chimed again as it shut behind them. June walked to the counter and stared at the medal. "Is that the one you never show anyone?" she asked. Harlan nodded. "Why today?" He thought for a long moment before answering. Then, gently, he placed the medal back into the box. "Because not every battle ends with bullets," he said. "Some end when you show what you're willing to protect without violence." June reached out and touched his arm. "You didn't yell." "No," he said. "Some things speak louder in silence." That afternoon, news traveled faster than grease on a skillet. Veterans showed up without invitation, some locals, some from out of town. One brought a Vietnam-era compass, another a folded flag. An old Navy cook dropped off a box of ration recipes, just in case. Someone spray-painted over the charred mark on the welcome sign. But instead of covering it, they framed it with a mural, an eagle in mid-flight, wings spread across the board, the words underneath, "Still standing." That night, Ramona returned alone. She stood where the biker had stood, but brought no offer. Just silence. Harlan poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one to her. "I heard," she said. "I know. You didn't have to do it like that." "I did," he replied. She looked at him, her voice suddenly softer. "Why didn't you fight?" He held up the metal box. "I already did." The sun had barely tipped over the horizon when the stillness was shattered. The back door of Lena's joint creaked open, swinging in the breeze. June's napkins were still stacked neatly on the table. Her pink backpack hung from the coat rack, untouched. But the girl was gone. Harlan knew something was wrong before anyone spoke. It was in the silence, the kind that veterans know too well, the kind that signals something sacred has been breached. Then the front door burst open. Ramona staggered in, her face pale, her chest heaving. The woman who once ruled boardrooms and biker gangs now looked like a mother broken in half. "They took her," she whispered, barely able to stand. "They took June." Harlan didn't need to ask who. He already knew. Ramona gripped the counter, her knuckles white. "It was Riggs. He and what's left of the crew. I tried to stop them. I didn't know they would go that far. God, Harlan, She couldn't finish. "I lost my daughter once," she said, voice cracking. "Don't let me lose her again." Harlan didn't answer. He walked to the back hallway, the one no customer ever entered, and stopped in front of a steel locker. With a steady hand, he turned the key. Inside, hanging with reverence, was his past. The olive-drab Force Recon uniform was pressed, immaculate. His tactical belt hung beside it, complete with flashlight, trauma kit, map pouch. An old headset, still tuned to emergency frequencies, rested on the shelf. A stethoscope and field surgical kit were packed in an ammo pouch, worn but ready. Everything smelled faintly of desert wind and disinfectant. Harlan didn't hesitate. He stripped off his apron, buttoned up the uniform, and laced the boots like he'd never stopped wearing them. His movements were smooth, precise, unburdened by time. When he stepped back into the bar, the years fell away. Ramona looked up, and for the first time, she truly saw him. Not the quiet cook, not the gentle janitor, but the man he had been all along, Captain Harlan Boyd, Force Recon, Field Medic, and Firestorm. He slung a tactical bag over his shoulder. "Where?" he asked. "I tracked their location," she said, pulling out her phone. "They're holed up in an abandoned train yard outside of town. I can get us in." "No," Harlan said. "You're staying here. I'm not sitting this out. You're a mother now, so be one." Ramona's eyes flared, but then she stopped, breathing through clenched teeth. Her voice fell to a whisper. "Bring her back." Harlan paused at the door, turning back for just a moment. "I will. I promise you that." The train yard was a skeleton from another time. Rusted rails twisted through gravel. Cargo containers stood like forgotten tombs, tagged with graffiti and old sins. A fire barrel burned low near the main warehouse, just enough light for the shadows to breathe. Inside, June sat tied to a chair, her cheeks streaked with tears, but her eyes fiercely defiant. Even in fear, she was her father's daughter. Riggs paced in front of her, muttering. "Let's see how the war hero handles this," he sneered, cracking his knuckles. "Bet he doesn't make it past the gate." But Harlan didn't need a gate. He came through the dark like a whisper of vengeance, slipping between shadows like they were old friends. His boots never scuffed gravel. His flashlight never flickered. He was a ghost of discipline, honed in 1,000-night deserts. From the rooftop, he surveyed the terrain. 2 men guarding the entrance, 1 patrolling the side, 1 in the rafters. No margin for error. He moved like muscle memory, disarming the first with a silent chokehold, dragging the second into a cargo bin. Each takedown was clinical, fast, and without cruelty. Then he was inside. Riggs heard the clink of metal and turned. Too late. Harlan stepped from the dark like a storm breaking. "You don't touch my daughter," he said, his voice like gravel soaked in steel. Riggs charged. The fight was fast, brutal. Fists, knees, elbows, no wasted movements. Harlan was outnumbered, but never outmatched. One by one, the remaining bikers fell. Not because he was stronger, but because he was trained to end chaos before it began. He grabbed Riggs by the vest and slammed him into a steel beam. "You think this is justice?" Riggs spat. "No," Harlan growled, tightening his grip. "This is protection." He let the man drop, unconscious. "But not tonight. Tonight, we bring her home." The night air clung to the earth like breath held too long. Cricket stilled. Gravel held its noise. Even the rusted rails of the abandoned freight yard seemed to brace for something unseen. Harlan moved like water through the dark, fluid, precise, silent. No shouting. No explosions. No bravado. Only the whisper of boots over concrete, the subtle click of gear, and the practiced rhythm of a man who had done this before, and survived. Force Recon didn't need theatrics. It needed results. A two-finger hand signal, a half-second glance to assess wind and cover, a grip around the corner's edge, checking for threats. Every motion was deliberate, no wasted breath, no uncertain step. This wasn't just a rescue, it was an echo. Red dust all over again. Only this time there were no teammates, no backup, no air support. Just one man, one mission, one little girl. And the weight of everything he had lost. Inside a half-toppled cargo container, dimly lit by a single flickering camping lantern, June sat hunched over another child, her friend, a local boy from town who had gotten swept into the chaos by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The boy's leg was bleeding, grazed by flying debris during the abduction. June's hands didn't tremble. She had seen worse on her father's scars. Using an old t-shirt and a torn shoelace, she wrapped a makeshift compression bandage around his thigh. She tied it tightly, double-looped, just like her dad taught her, during those boring Sundays at home when they practiced knots instead of watching cartoons. Her lips moved silently, repeating her father's words from memory. Bleeding that won't stop needs pressure. Stay calm. Stay smart. Stay kind. Her friend whimpered in pain. June placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone," she whispered. "He's coming." She didn't mean the sheriff. She meant her dad. Outside, Harlan crept past the rusting shell of a burned-out trailer, stopped, then slowly lifted his gaze to the second floor of the adjacent warehouse. A thin glow seeped through the window, just enough to silhouette movement. Riggs was there, smoking, talking to someone inside. Two guards at the base, bored and leaning on metal pipes. A lesser man would have gone loud. Harlan went smart. He crawled beneath the siding, slipped through a busted vent shaft, and climbed without a sound, up steel supports, across a beam no wider than a shoebox, inch by inch, breath by breath. Inside, June heard something overhead. She looked up, nothing. Then, a whisper from the shadows. "June." Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. Harlan dropped like a shadow behind Riggs, silencing him with one smooth hold. Temporary, enough to keep him down without killing him. He made his way to June. "Can you walk?" he whispered. She nodded. "But he can't." Her friend was barely conscious. Harlan didn't hesitate. He scooped the boy into one arm, June into the other. "Hold tight," he said. Ramona arrived just as the sun's first light peeled over the horizon. She stood hidden behind a crumpled rail car, her breath catching in her throat. She couldn't move, not out of fear, but awe. There he was, Harlan, in uniform, moving with absolute command. She watched him emerge from the shadows like a myth. The boy in one arm, June pressed close to his chest, her little hands gripping his collar. No noise, no theatrics, no one dead, just purpose. Ramona's knees buckled. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks. She thought she'd known war. She thought she'd known strength. But what she saw now was something else entirely. A father who carried pain in silence, purpose in his veins, and love like a shield. She bit her knuckle to keep from sobbing. June saw her. The girl gave the faintest wave, her face smeared with dirt, eyes still shining. Ramona collapsed to her knees, not from weakness, from recognition, because now she knew for certain. The man she had once left behind, the daughter she had unknowingly given away, the family she never thought she could have, was already waiting for her all along. By the time the sheriff's deputies arrived, the sun had fully risen. Riggs and his crew were zip-tied, groaning, unconscious, but alive. Sheriff Hart took one look at the scene and didn't ask a single question. He only clapped Harlan on the shoulder, then nodded at June. "She's got your eyes," he whispered. "No," Harlan said, looking over to where Ramona stood, tears drying under the morning sun. "She's got hers." Later that morning, back at Lena's joint, the bell above the door jingled. Harlan stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, apron back on, like nothing had happened. June was curled up in a booth, her friend resting beside her, sipping hot chocolate. Ramona approached cautiously. "I don't know how to thank you," she began. "You don't need to," he said, pouring coffee. She paused, voice cracking. "I never got to say goodbye." "You don't have to." There was silence. Then Harlan added softly, "But you can say hello, if you want." Ramona looked over at June. She smiled, then nodded. "Hello." The next morning, sunlight broke across the cracked pavement like forgiveness. Soft, unwavering, undeserved. The town of Dust Ridge awoke slowly, but purposefully. There was something sacred in the air. In front of Lena's joint, the broken remnants of the old wooden sign lay in a heap, blackened at the edges from the firebomb just days before. But the ashes had cooled, and what had been charred was now being rebuilt. A crowd had gathered, veterans in denim jackets patched with forgotten wars, teenagers with paint on their jeans, old ladies carrying muffins and measuring tape. The sheriff stood with a hammer in one hand, nails in the other. Even the local pastor held up one side of the new wooden beam. June stood next to her father, a brush in hand, dabbing golden paint along the newly carved letters. Lena's joint. A place watched over by quiet warriors. The phrase had come from the sheriff, but the idea had lived in Harlan all along. They didn't need speeches. No ribbon cutting, no press, just people, working, healing, building something that would last. Inside, the bar had changed. Subtly, quietly. One corner near the back now held a shadow box lined with medals, a folded flag, black and white photographs of men who'd once worn the same uniform as Harlan. Next to it, a shelf of dog tags, not in a glass case. Open, so you could touch them. Above it all, carved into the wood with care, the Hall of Honor. No one explained what it meant. No one needed to. It wasn't about politics, or war stories, or grandstanding. It was about presence, about remembering names no longer called, about letting the silence between the laughter speak, too. Late that afternoon, Ramona pulled up alone on her bike, chrome shimmering, dust clinging to her boots. She stepped off, leather creaking at her shoulders, and carried something in both hands, a small, time-worn wooden box. Harlan met her at the door. They didn't speak, not right away. She handed him the box with both hands, fingers trembling slightly. Not from fear, but reverence. He opened it slowly. Inside lay a single medal, the Navy Cross, the second highest award for valor a Marine could receive. It had once been his. He had refused it. And yet, here it was. Returned. Not by the government, not by a commander, but by someone who had finally understood what it meant to carry both pain and honor at once. Harlan stared at it for a long moment, then closed the lid. "I didn't earn it," he said quietly. You did, Ramona replied, her voice firm but full of something else. Something new. You just didn't want to carry it alone. He looked at her. For the first time, really looked. Past the tattoos, past the armor, past the fire in her, and into the child she had once been. The child he had saved. The woman she had become. The mother she now tried to be. Harlan exhaled, then nodded. But instead of putting the box away, he turned and walked it across the room, to the back wall of the bar, where the Hall of Honor had been quietly built, piece by piece over the last few days. He opened the lid one more time, then carefully removed the metal. With steady hands, he mounted it on a hook, centered, polished, but not elevated above the others. Not for him, but for those who couldn't. And beside it, he pinned a small note, handwritten, simple. For the fallen and for the forgotten. Ramona watched him, tears forming, but refusing to fall. She clenched her jaw, then slowly walked to the counter where June sat, working on a drawing with a handful of crayons. Without looking up, June asked softly, "Will you be here tomorrow?" Ramona crouched beside her, still unsure how to answer. But then June turned her drawing around. It showed the bar's sign, the Hall of Honor, and 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a sky full of stars. June pointed. "That's you." Ramona blinked. "Me? You're part of it now," the girl said matter-of-factly. "You don't need a tattoo for that." Ramona smiled. This time, the tears did fall. That evening, a quiet ceremony took place as the sun slipped behind the horizon. No music, no microphones, just candlelight on wood, firelight in eyes. The sheriff said a few words, short, real. Harlan stood off to the side, not seeking attention, just present. Veterans stepped forward, one by one, each adding something to the wall. A patch, a badge, a photo, a prayer card. Then Ramona stepped forward, pulling off her riding gloves. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a single gold ring. "My father wore this in Mosul," she said, voice husky. "He died before I ever knew him. But I think, maybe, he helped send someone who would save me instead." She placed the ring at the base of the wall. No applause, just silence. And in that silence, peace. Later that night, Harlan poured one final cup of coffee for the evening. He took it to the back table, sat beneath the mounted metal, and raised the cup toward the wall. "To the quiet ones," he said. He drank. The candle beside him flickered, then steadied. And for the first time in a long, long while, he felt home. The morning light fell through the wide front windows of Lena's joint like warm honey. Soft, golden, unhurried. The bar-turned haven breathed with a quiet rhythm now. Coffee brewed, chairs scraped gently, and laughter floated like birdsong through the rafters. Behind the counter, June stood on a stool, tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth as she folded a napkin into a crisp square. Perfect edges, just like she'd learned. Ramona sat beside her, sleeves rolled up, eyes patient. "Like this, right?" June asked, holding up her latest fold. Ramona studied it. "Almost. But see this corner?" She adjusted it gently. "It's not about being perfect. It's about being present." June nodded like she understood more than her years should allow. "Did you always know how to do this?" the girl asked. Ramona chuckled. "No. The only thing I knew how to fold was a contract." "Contracts sound boring," Ramona smiled. "Sometimes they are. But sometimes, they're promises dressed up in big words." June blinked. "Did you ever break a promise?" The question landed like a feather over a bruise. Ramona inhaled, exhaled, looked toward the kitchen. "I think I'm still trying to keep one," she said quietly. June didn't ask more. She just folded the next napkin. Harlan stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. His hair was slightly damp, face freshly shaven. He looked lighter. Not younger, but less burdened. He walked to the wall near the back, unlooped the faded janitor's apron from the hook, and carried it toward the front. Ramona turned as he approached, curiosity rising behind her eyes. Harlan didn't speak right away. He simply folded the apron slowly, almost ceremonially, and then placed it on a new hook by the register. Ramona glanced at him, then at the apron. "You're not cooking today?" "Nope," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "That's a first." Harlan leaned his elbows against the counter, the lines of his face etched in soft resolve. "I think," he said slowly, "it's time someone else served for a while." Ramona tilted her head, unsure whether to laugh or press further. "Where are you going?" He looked past her for a moment, toward the photo wall, the Hall of Honor, the faces, the dust that never quite left his boots. "Nowhere," he replied. "Just stepping back." Ramona searched his face, eyes narrowing slightly. "Is this goodbye?" A smile tugged at the corner of Harlan's lips. Not even close. Then, with a familiar quiet grace, he reached under the counter and retrieved the old metal kettle, the same one he'd used every morning. He poured the water with practiced hands into the French press, stirred it slowly, and waited. Ramona folded her arms, watching him. "You just said you're not cooking." "I'm not," he replied. "But coffee." He turned, lifting the cup like a sacred object. "Coffee still needs to be done right." She grinned. "You're impossible." "You're welcome." Later that day, the regulars came through. Maggie, the retired nurse, left a poem scrawled on a napkin near her teacup. The blind veteran brought a new book for the reading shelf. Sheriff tapped twice on the counter, as always, but this time with a smile and a wink. They all noticed it, the apron on the hook, untouched, and they all understood. In the back, June found an old photo tucked behind a drawer, Harlan in uniform, standing next to 3 Marines, all of them young, proud, and forever frozen in a moment before life changed. She brought it to him. He didn't say anything, just stared at it. Then June whispered, "You can wear both, you know." He looked down. "The apron and the uniform," she continued. "They're both ways of protecting people." Harlan's throat tightened. He reached out, tousled her hair. "You've got a strong heart, kid." June shrugged. "I get it from both my parents." Ramona overheard, and for the first time, her eyes didn't flicker with guilt or hesitation. Just awe. That evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the world in copper light, Harlan walked out back, stood near the little flagpole they'd set up behind the kitchen, and raised a fresh banner. Not a military flag, not a country's claim, just a white cloth, stitched with the symbol of the bar, a cup of coffee, and an eagle above it, wings spread wide. He fastened it quietly, let it catch the breeze, and stood with his hands in his pockets, watching it fly. Ramona joined him, leaning on the railing beside him. "Ever think you'd end up here?" she asked. Harlan chuckled. "Never." She nodded. "Me neither." He glanced at her. "But we're still standing." She smiled. "And still serving?" Inside, June lined up folded napkins on each table, taking her time, humming something soft. She stopped by the wall of photos, looked up, and whispered a tiny greeting to each name. Then she turned, looked at the apron, and smiled. It hung there, not forgotten, not discarded, just resting, like its owner finally could. Morning sunlight filtered gently through the wide windows of Lena's joint. The town's heartbeat, once faint and scattered, now pulsed quietly within those walls. The old wooden sign had been repaired, and below it, painted in modest but deliberate strokes, were the words, "A place watched over by quiet warriors." Inside, the cafe had changed, subtly, beautifully. In the far corner, where silence once lived, a Vietnam veteran sat reading a paperback so worn the spine had collapsed. The title was faded, but the way he turned the pages, slow and reverent, made it feel sacred. Nearby, a single mother entered with her son. Her eyes scanned the menu, unsure. She reached into her worn purse, but before she could speak, Harlan, his hand still wet from washing dishes, shook his head gently and smiled. "No charge today," he said. She blinked. "Why?" He nodded toward a glass jar behind the counter. Inside it were challenge coins, unit patches, folded notes, even a medal of merit. And at the bottom, one line scribbled on a napkin, "Because someone already paid it forward." Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Thank you." Her son, no older than June had been when the cafe first opened, tugged at her sleeve and smiled. On the far wall, just below an old photo of Harlan's platoon, was a new canvas. June had painted it herself, meticulously tracing the Marine Corps emblem, but adding her own touch, a soft blue butterfly resting on the eagle's wing. She didn't explain why she added it, but everyone understood. Ramona stood behind her, arms gently folded, watching as her daughter, yes, her daughter, gave something permanent to a place that had already given so much to her. Outside, under the courthouse's wide marble steps, a small crowd gathered. Ramona stood before them, no longer clad in black leather or veiled in shadows. Her voice, when it rose, carried the clarity of someone who had come full circle. "The Silent Warriors Foundation," she announced, unveiling the plaque beside the flag. "For those who served, and still do, quietly, in every act of decency." The sheriff was among the first to clap. So were the teachers, the farmers, the retired mechanics, and the young veterans who now had somewhere to go when they didn't want to explain the nightmares anymore. That night, Lena's joint didn't close. It simply dimmed, the kind of dim that wrapped around your shoulders like a blanket. Harlan cleaned up as usual. Ramona wiped a table beside him. They didn't speak for a while. They didn't need to. She finally asked, "You ever think it had become all this?" He shrugged and chuckled. "No." She tilted her head. "Then why'd you do it?" Harlan placed the last mug down gently, the rim catching the amber light. "Because sometimes, one table is enough, if it's the right table." She watched him for a moment longer, then nodded. "Thank you for keeping the light on." He looked at her. "You helped light it." Later, Harlan stepped out onto the porch. The stars were just beginning to wake. June was across the street, helping a new kid tie their shoelaces. Ramona was loading books into a van with the words, "Veteran Literacy Program," stenciled across its side. The old neon sign flickered once, then glowed steady. Someone once asked Harlan why he never wore his medals, why the walls of Lena's joint weren't plastered with photos of heroism or the faces of the fallen. He'd only smiled and said nothing. But in the quiet of that night, with the soft hum of healing in the air, he spoke, not out loud, but deep within, as if to the ghosts that sometimes still walked beside him. "I don't stay silent because I'm ashamed," he thought. "I stay silent because I want the things I do today to speak louder than anything I did back then." And they did, one plate at a time, one act of grace at a time, one table at a time. Before you go, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Whether it's a quiet town, a big city, or somewhere in between. Drop us a comment below and say hello. It's always a joy to see how far these stories can reach. And if this story touched your heart, even just a little, consider subscribing to the channel. We share stories like this every week, filled with hope, healing, and a reminder that kindness still matters. Thank you for watching. Until next time, take care of yourself and those around you.